So for more insight, we welcome Janatan Sayeh, research analyst focused on Iran at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, joining us from Washington. Thank you so much for your time. Disturbing images, day 10 of these anti-regime protests, initially sparked over the dire economic situation in Iran, spreading fast. Your assessment on what is unfolding right now?
As you accurately pointed out, even though the trigger was in fact economic, the grievances are not. So we see people from different sectors converging really when it comes to this protest movement. So their demands are no longer economic, even though the initial trigger was. So as we move more towards a protest movement that's not only nationalist, but is actually calling for the return of the monarchy, the main difference this time around is that Iranians have very vocally chosen their alternative. So the criticism that we don't know what might happen after regime collapse is no longer applicable because we know what Iranians are actually moving forward with.
And as we just heard in that report, in an attempt to appease protesters, the government announcing it will hand out $7 in cash to nearly the entire population as these food prices are expected to jump. Surely that would just infuriate people even further.
It certainly does. And to look at it from a perspective of the average Iranian, they know that the Islamic Republic pays different terrorist proxies such as Hezbollah over $1,000 a month, while as their own people that are suffering under this economic collapse, dare I say, are just getting an offer of roughly $7, which effectively is nothing. Now, you have to couple that with the fact that the rial's really value has again depreciated against the dollar for imports as well, which means probably what we're going to see in the next few days is a 60% increase in all imported items, which is many of them are essential goods. So the average household really struggling to put bread on the table. But most importantly, we're talking about the Bazari class, the business owners that no longer actually can sell their goods. So when we see strikes across different bazaars in Tehran, it's partially fueled by the fact that the average Iranian doesn't have the purchase power to actually go and shop anymore. So we're reaching a stage where the middle class is disappearing and the lower class, which has historically been pro the Islamic Republic, no longer has an incentive to be a supporter of the regime.
And yet there's still money to pay terror proxies, as you are outlining. Janatan, Benjamin Netanyahu is describing this as a potentially decisive moment for the Iranian people. How do you see this all unfolding?
We've seen how Israel has messaged to Iranians during the 12-day war. The message was very clear that Israel stands with the Iranians, endorses their national unity, and sees this regime as a shared threat between the two. And that was the signal that was communicated throughout the 12-day war. Particularly accompanying that with action was the fact that Israel targeted the repression centers towards the last few days of the war. So ideally, what we would see if there's another round of confrontation is an amplification of that campaign against the regime's repression centers. We're talking about Basij headquarters, REGC headquarters, law enforcement, and different layers, ideally coupled with cyber attacks against the state-run TV and satellite channels. That way, you can really message towards Iranians should there be another opportunity for Israel to really aid Iranians to ensure that they have another ally in the region that is increasingly turbulent and anti-Israel.
And talking about the 12-day war, what about the U.S. impact here? We've seen images recently of Donald Trump and Lindsey Graham with a cap saying, "Make Iran great again." What do you make of the U.S. role here going forward?
We can say what the regime in Tehran makes of it, and what happened to Maduro is really a direct threat to the Islamic Republic officials. We heard that the Supreme Leader Khamenei is looking at potentially relocating and escaping to Moscow. Maybe he might want to meet Bashar Assad there. We just still don't know yet. But from the regime's perspective, we're increasingly entering a world where not only Israel is posing an existential crisis, but also America. They were under the impression that Trump is here to make a deal. And that was the case. Trump did really open up an avenue for possible negotiations, but Tehran kept really over-exploiting its leverages, and now it's left with no cards. So, of course, on the other hand, the only rational conclusion from the Trump administration is not necessarily to push regime change, but really to push this current collapsing regime towards its end and ensure that the opposition inside Iran that is greatly influenced by the monarchy is in fact able to be a US ally in the long term, which seems to be the case right now.
We certainly are watching. Janatan Sayeh, live from Washington, thank you as always. Appreciate